All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. A little later in the show, we're going to be joined by Sam Monson of PFF to talk about some teams in the NFL that interest us. But before that, we're going to talk a little French Open in a second and Stanley Cup Finals opening prices. But let's start off, Drew, with, to me, the big market of interest at the moment. That's the NBA Finals series price and everything around that matchup. The Celtics are minus 225. At some spots, they're still minus 210. The Mavericks ranging from like plus 180, plus 190. Have you bet into this market?
I haven't, but I don't think it's a very fair number. And I guess we can kind of talk through what do you do if you have a position already on the Celtics that has a massive amount of equity in it, and how much of your powder do you want to keep dry in case the Celtics do something dumb early in the series, like lose game one, in which case, yes, then that would definitely have a clear and obvious market entry opportunity to get more Celtics down. But the way I look at game one price is pretty close. I'm at almost 7.5. I'm pretty close on the money line as well. I have the Celtics at about minus 269 here. And when they go back to Dallas in games, so basically a high likelihood that the Celtics win game 1 and 2. When they go back to Dallas, I have those games lined about a coin flip. I'm only counting on 20 minutes out of Porzingis early in this series. And I'm expecting that just in general, you're going to have a little bit of a decrease in the pace that's kind of commensurate with the stage of the playoffs. And so I'm projecting 215 points, which would be an over, certainly in game one. And I think that the only interest I have in attacking any of these markets is going to be Boston minus 2.5 games, because again, my most likely outcome here is that the Celtics defend home court in 1 and 2. They split in Dallas, and then they take care of business in game 5. So minus 2.5 for Boston for me. My fair price in that is plus 140. You can get much better prices than that out there in the streets. So I'm going to play a little bit of that in case this is a bit of a runaway series for the Celtics. I look at kind of sweep prices, kind of intriguing as well. I have that as 17% chance to happen. And then, winning in 4 or 5, I have as 42.5%. That's how I get my plus 140. So I'm not sure exactly why the market and the series betting pool in particular is giving you such a huge delta, but I'm pretty close to game lines here. I would expect we see a pick 'em in game 3 unless there's, some sort of zigzag, just market enthusiasm at play that affects that close. And as you carry this all the way through, I'm nowhere close to minus 200 for the Celtics. We talked about it last week. My fair is minus 420. I really am not sure exactly what is going on with this from a market dynamic standpoint. Can you help me understand it a little bit better with your experience on the other side of the counter?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most fascinating markets that we've had in a while because it seems so wrong for a market that is relatively high profile. So I think there's two things. Like, one, is it actually wrong? And then two, why is it still allowed to be wrong in the market? Why hasn't it been bashed into shape? And on the first one, every market maker that I've spoken to has this line fair somewhere between minus 300 and minus 400. Two, if you just want to go off like the market price, and most people I've spoken to have this line higher than minus 6.5, like you do, say that you're taking 6.5 as the baseline kind of fair to project off of for the rest of the series. And I understand that, there is zigzag, things change game to game. It's not like every single line will be based around this, but if you just take that as a starting point, then the series should be more like minus 280, just off the 6.5. And I think there's a lot more scope for that to go to 7.5 than there is to go to 5.5, because I think that the market is still baking in some uncertainty around Porzingis. I suspect once he gets ruled in, and I believe he will get ruled in, the line is going to go to 7 or 7.5, and then that's where you're getting, your minus 300 to minus 400 fair. So I think the price is wrong. Like I said, it's still minus 210 with a ton of liquidity. And so the question is how does that price exist? Why is it allowed to be wrong in the market? And I have a couple of theories. The first one is that a lot of people who shape these markets have just been backing Boston all season already. And there is just not a ton of appetite. If you've been backing them at 5-1 preseason at, plus 200 a month or two ago. If you've been backing them at all these bigger prices, it's like people have already gotten their fill on Boston and they just don't really want to blast into minus 210 when they have a lot of Celtics already in hand. And then the other thing, I think this is a really real thing by talking to smart people about this, there is just an apprehension, rational or not, of just not wanting to back Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown at minus 210 in the finals against Luka Doncic. And I think a lot of that is amplified by these people already have a lot of Celtics in hand, but I do think that is an aspect too, where people are just kind of afraid and expecting something to go wrong. It's like you're kind of pricing in a potential choke into the market, which I'm not sure is correct, but you can kind of see why people would feel that way because, a lot of the people shaping these markets have loaded up on Boston basically every series the past 2 years and have gotten burned a couple of times. But does that stack up with your thoughts and kind of what you've been hearing?
It does. And I think the only other thing I can add is that if for whatever, there's a world where you are a data scientist, you're coming to this series with a price, and you're using data and science instead of gut, and you are you're upweighting the sample of Dallas Mavericks basketball from the trade deadline till today, and particularly upgrading what you saw from them against elite competition in the Western Conference, and your conclusion is the Mavericks may be a buy. Like, people are still a little bit, hesitant to recognize that they are playing at the same or close enough level to the Celtics to make this a series. If you feel that way, there is no reason to bet Dallas series price, right? I feel like every Dallas series price that's been written in the last week is just a donkey bet. And if you have an edge on the Mavericks, just take it to the game market. Like, you're getting bigger limits there anyway. 6.5, as you mentioned, like if Porzingis gets ruled in, that goes to 7. Like, there may be people that are sitting around waiting, just hoping to get best price possible on Mavericks for game 1, and they'll go back to the well in game 2, and you can roll over and get a lot more money down than you're going to get betting into a series plus 180. And so, there is my other kind of thought or guess is there a sort of a, when you get to the finals of NBA, NHL, who cares? Like, there's going to be more appetite for people to take the dog price. Like, in general, like, it doesn't matter if it's the Celtics and Jaylen Brown and Tatum. Like, yeah, and as you correctly point out, I think that pretty much everyone who's been paying attention and is using numbers to betting into futures pools for the NBA is pretty satisfied with their position as currently stands on the Celtics. And so, I think maybe, if I were writing the book, would I do this exact kind of setup and say, we're going to get a bunch of donkeys that come and bet this series price, and they're going to bet the plus 180. And I know that's a favorable price for the house, so I'll write those all day long. And then you turn around and you just kind of protect yourself in game 1 as you shape that market, and make sure you don't give the people who may have, some kind of at least, a reason to believe that the Mavericks are closer to the Celtics than we are saying. You don't want to give them free points in game 1 in that type of a liquid pool. So that's kind of my general sentiment. And I'm sure we'll get more into the X's and O's and things like that as we get closer to the series tipping off, which I hope it's this week, right? Like, we're not waiting any longer, right? So it is June. It is time for the finals to start. It feels like it's been an eon since we've seen the Celtics. I'm excited to see them with Porzingis, and I'm excited for people to be reminded of exactly how elite they are when they are fully at full strength.
Yep. We'll get into more of the matchup stuff on our next episode, but the last thing I'll say about kind of the market pricing dynamics of this, it reminds me a little bit of both the 2016 US presidential election and the 2021, where the 2021, it feels, this Boston-Dallas series, it does feel like the underdog is gaining all the public support, Trump and the Mavs in this case, and there's just not a huge amount of appetite to back the Joe Biden Celtics, at a decently minus number. And then the 2016 one, it reminds me of, like, if the Celtics lose this series, everyone is going to tell, people who bet based on numbers that, you said the Celtics were 100% to win the series. It's like, no, everyone said
they're 80%.
Yeah, everyone said that Trump was like between a 20 and 30% chance or whatever to win in 2016, which is, if it's minus 300 to minus 400, then you're 20 to 25% chance the Mavericks win. But anyway, we'll get into a little bit more of that later in the week. But let's quickly hit on the Stanley Cup Finals. The Oilers and Panthers punched their tickets respectively in their game sixes. Tight games, both of them. Oilers got completely outplayed by Dallas, but were able to squeak it out. Though, to be fair, I think they'd largely outplayed the Stars in the first 5 games and certainly warranted winning that series 4-2. And now the Oilers are plus 110 against the Panthers, who are minus 130 on the series price. The game 1 price largely echoes those numbers too. How are you feeling about the oil as an oil man yourself?
Yeah, feeling pretty lucky to be here. Better to be lucky than good, as you mentioned. Game 6 felt like the ice was tilted, and yet they somehow come away with the win. It was really entertaining. Playoff hockey all along this. I've really enjoyed the Stanley Cup playoffs to this point, and I think either way, Panthers or Oilers, I think we're going to have a deserving and exciting champion, which is all you can really ask for, and it should be a great series. I don't see a clear and obvious matchup that is screaming get more down on the Oilers at this point. I think they have the more talented skaters, but weaker goaltending, weaker defense, slightly weaker defense, I guess, and so it should be light favorite here for the Panthers, and that's what we're looking at. I don't think that I'm not inclined to get off my Oilers position at all in the futures pool. And actually, just kind of a funny wrinkle. I've been running cold. That's the month of June, new month, fresh slate. The Oilers bet that I made happened before the cold streak started. And so did my Celtics Eastern Conference future. Everything that I've been winning recently or have positive equity in all happened before the Super Bowl. So I think that gives me that much little superstitious hope that Canada can regain the Stanley Cup after all these years.
Okay, it's good that your Oilers bet is curse agnostic.
It's curse agnostic.
Placed before the curse. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much of an edge to be had on this series. If I were to make a bet, I think there's still some like plus 117, that type of range around the Oilers. That would be my bet. I'd have this slight more line closer to pick. Panthers are a strange team where defensively they are, excellent. They're extremely deep, but can be a bit of a grind for them to score at times. And a lot of that has been going up, against elite goalies in Vasilevsky, Swayman, and Shesterkin. And that's certainly a big part of it. And they will have an easier goaltender matchup against Stuart Skinner, who, to be fair, has been perfectly fine since Game 5 of the Vancouver series. But, that is a big advantage for the Panthers. At the same time, as someone who has spent a lot of the past 2 years betting on the Florida Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky can have some shaky moments. And it's not like he is, overall, these past 2 playoffs runs, he's been excellent, but he's not without his sins. I will largely need the Oilers in this series with you too, Drew. So hopefully we can break the curse together and have a nice winning June. All right. The field continues to narrow as we draw closer to champions being crowned at the French Open. Find out who advances on the clay courts of Roland Garros by streaming matches on Peacock today through Sunday. All right. Let's talk about the red clay of Roland Garros. Let's start on the women's side. Iga Swiatek, having survived her epic scare against Naomi Osaka, she is now minus 190 to win the French Open. Aryna Sabalenka, who is on fire, plus 333. Elena Rybakina taking care of business as well at 6-1. Beyond that, it starts to get a little dicier with Coco Gauff, Vandriva, Ons Jabeur, Marketa Vondrousova. And I'll say Paolini's name just to to close out the field. Is there any bet to be made here? Is it on Iga, or is there any chance that Sabalenka or Rybakina can really shake things up?
Why lay the price with Iga when you could just wait for her to be down match point live and you can get her at 10-1, right? No, that was the match of the tournament so far is a toss-up between the Iga Naomi, just from the quality standpoint, and the Djokovic Musetti from a how is this happening standpoint. The performances Iga has put in since coming close, a close call against Naomi Osaka have been superlative. She lost 10 points in her last match. Her last match, she lost 10 points. That was the most dominant performance that I have ever seen. And I've been watching tennis for a long time. I've been betting tennis for a long time. I cannot remember anything that was that tilted. We've seen Iga double bagel people before. It has never been that, clear and obvious that she was just absolutely peaking. And if she carries that form through to this next round against Vondrousova, she is very warranted of the current price at -190, and is relatively soft test expected against Gauff, with the only chance for real drama to come in the women's final. You're not gonna get a -190 on Iga in the final, and I guess if you math it out, I think there is a non-zero chance that Coco goes down. I'm not saying it'll happen, but that's at least a pretty competitive quarterfinal there in the second quarter against Jabeur. But either way, Coco or Jabeur against Iga in the top half semifinals is going to be lined in the -800 range. And then in the finals against Sabalenka, I would make Iga in the -400 range. In the finals against Rybakina, I would make her in the -350 to -400 range. So I don't think Rybakina gets there. I think Sabalenka's got enough right now, although her test in the quarterfinals is certainly tougher. No disrespect to Jasmine Paolini, who is very, very, very solid up-and-coming young player. Not expecting Rybakina to have much of a test against Paolini. Andreeva has shown no ability to get through the power that Sabalenka brings to the table. So we're headed for a Sabalenka-Rybakina bottom half of the women's draw, and that's going to be incredibly, incredibly entertaining match. Sabalenka and Rybakina are dead even by my numbers. Rybakina has the X factor in terms of just kind of cool, calm, collected, performing well in a Grand Slam semifinal, where Sabalenka has, in a lot of times, kind of gone completely airmail. So, I would lean Rybakina is going to get there. Sabalenka, though, is playing very, very well right now and is in rhythm and has yet to really be tested. So that'll be fun. And then I think Iga beats them in straights.
Okay. How, in terms of Iga's match against Osaka, where, for anyone who doesn't know, Iga was down match point. Was she down 5-2 in the third? And Osaka wasn't so much the match point. It's more that she had like a put away forehand at 30-15 serving for it. That she's probably, -1500 to put away, and then hits it into the, unforced error. And then Iga comes back. Do you think that was a bad sign for Iga, that match, and how close it was? Or does it say more just about how incredibly well Osaka was playing?
It was the perfect scenario for an Iga upset, which is to say the weather, the speed of the court, and the roof being closed were all massive advantage Osaka. And then Osaka showed up with her absolute best game. And I think it told us something about Osaka, and I think it told us that Iga can survive that type of a close call without basically packing it up and capitulating. And that was good signal that Iga just has the fight through it ability if things are not going her way on a given day. Now, if the women's final is under closed roof with those type of conditions, and Sabalenka's on the other side of the court, it's going to be tough. Those two were very, very, very close in those type of conditions in Madrid, and so I think like that, as we wake up on that Saturday morning of the women's final, we'll have to assess basically like, is this Iga optimal conditions, at which point it's a blowout, or is this are things stacked enough against her in terms of a player with power who can execute absolute precision shot making in those type of conditions with a closed roof? Then you would actually have to maybe take a shot against her, but we'll leave that for Saturday. And for what it's worth, the weather has gotten substantially less awful in Paris in the last 24 hours, so I think it's probably going to be fun.
Okay. And last one, just a quick thought. Any bet to be made on the men's side where Alcaraz is now a +135 favorite, Sinner 3-1, Novak Djokovic, having survived his scare against Cerundolo, is +350. And then we have Zverev following him, and Casper Ruud is still playing, I believe, as we speak. Any bet to be made in this market?
Ruud is through.
Oh, you won. Okay.
Dispatches. Taylor Fritz 3 just now. It's home. It's home. It was a sweat, man. Every Ruud match has been a sweat so far. And if you have been watching, if you backed Djokovic or Ruud to win this tournament, you are getting your money's worth. Like every single match has been just high drama, lots of fun stuff happening. And those two now play each other, and I favor Ruud in that one. Djokovic is physically broken at this point. If he comes back and he plays again to the level that we saw in the fifth set against, in the fifth set against Musetti and the fifth set against Ronaldo, then maybe he can win again. But I'm honestly like, he looks broken to me, and I would very, very strongly take a swing on Ruud at price. Even having Ruud future in pocket, I'm going to bet Ruud in this one. I'm against Alcaraz tomorrow. Tsitsipas is very live to win that match. I do not understand that market price whatsoever. We have not gotten any proof or data that suggests that Carlos is in peak form right now. He has come through a very soft path, and he is very vulnerable to lose this quarterfinal to Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas has been the best all-around player so far by my numbers at this tournament. I think is very live to take out both Alcaraz and Sinner. So if you wanted a swing away on a futures price, I think Tsitsipas is coming through the bottom, and I think he's going to do all that dirty work for him. But rather than take a 14-1 futures price, I think you bet 4-1 to beat Alcaraz, and then you roll that into whatever the price is going to be against Sinner, because Sinner's not losing to Dimitrov, but Tsitsipas can absolutely get the better of him. So that's my plan, to exercise some value on Tsitsipas winning these next two rounds, and then hopefully being completely out of gas when he faces Ruud in the final. Although Ruud's, man, he is firing a lot of bullets. He's used a lot of gas, and he has got to get by Djokovic, and then presumably Zverev, although Zverev is, in the course of bottling his match against our old friend Holger Rune. So Zverev might not even be in the way, which would be a huge. I mean, basically a lot of what's happened, I feel like, has been positive for Ruud's equity, but the price just isn't moving. So I'm just going to sit tight in this futures pool for right now.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, Ruud made tough work of that first set tiebreak against Fritz before ultimately coming through. All right, Indy 500 winner Joseph Newgarden looks to keep his momentum going this weekend as he battles the world's fastest drivers at Road America. Tune in Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock to see who takes the checkered flag in Wisconsin. All right, let's bring in now our good friend Sam Monson of PFF. Sam, it's good to see you, mate. I know there's no real off-season anymore in the NFL, but how has the off-season been treating you?
Yeah, we could definitely, there's a little bit of one, right? We get finished with the draft, you get about a week of draft recap, and then you get this brief little period of real off-season for like a couple of weeks, and then we start back up again. Then it's mini camps, training camps, preseason, and away we go again. So a little bit of an off-season.
Indeed. All right, well, we wanted to pick your brain on 4 teams in particular. The first one of which is the Cincinnati Bengals, who had a year from hell, so to speak, last year, though they were still in the mix to make the playoffs come the final couple of weeks. They're plus 165 to win the AFC North. Their over-under is 10.5 wins. They are being lined as the second favorite behind the Ravens. Now, the sneaky thing with Cincinnati is they do have a last place schedule, which might be the only time that happens in Joe Burrow's prime. But what do you think about the offseason that the Bengals have had, and where do you think they stand in relation to the Ravens in that division?
Yeah, I don't love the offseason that the Bengals have had. I think they were one of a number of teams whose offseason was primarily about sort of replacing their own losses, and trying to not go backwards as opposed to actually taking significant steps forward. And that old cliche, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards by default. Sort of feels like where the Bengals are this offseason to me. Now, a huge amount of that is offset by the things you just mentioned, right? Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in that division, and when he's healthy anyway, and the fact that they have that last place schedule, which for this division, I think is actually quite a big deal. Like you look at the other 3 teams in the division, the difference between the top 3 and the last place schedule in that division, I think is significant this year. So those 2 things on their own could offset the issues that they've had in the offseason. But you start going down that roster, and yeah, there's some really quality players: Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins is still there. But it gets kind of patchy pretty quickly, and you get into some spots where you're like, I don't love what they currently have there, even relative to last year.
Interesting. So it sounds like if the coaches coach up the replacement level players and this team makes a run, then Zach Taylor, coach of the year, 30-1 would be a fun bet. That's all I've staked on the Bengals to this point, although I'm very carefully watching what's going on with them in this offseason because, they basically, in my opinion, have 1.5 wins in pocket relative to the rest of the AFC North based on schedule alone. And we still have yet to see a complete offseason cycle with Joe Burrow kind of going through the entire preseason, offseason and preseason healthy with this team, which is, again, knock on wood that happens. But if it does, that'll be interesting to see if they can come out hot and put a little bit of pressure on the rest of the AFC. The other team that looks at least to be pretty obvious beneficiaries of schedule, favorable schedule, combined with the fact that they are just absolutely loaded from a talent standpoint, is the AFC. I guess I don't know if I really want to use the word dark horse, but they're, sixth choice somehow for this, even though they may have the most talented roster, and that's the New York Jets, who are plus 240 to win the AFC East still. Can you make sense of this price? And do you think that it is, is still kind of an unknown what they're going to get from, Aaron Rodgers this season with, Nathaniel Hackett, or are we kind of in the infancy here of people realizing this team is exactly on par with the top of this conference?
Yeah, it almost feels like because it didn't work last season that we've just decided it's not going to work, and the way that it didn't work, obviously Aaron Rodgers going down with what is still probably the most significant type of injury for, an NFL player to get, that Achilles. It's not, it's more devastating than an ACL or a shoulder injury or something like that. It's something that you could easily see lasting into the next year, particularly for a quarterback like Rodgers, who's 40 years old. And, we were talking on our show this morning that decline for old players, particularly quarterbacks, can manifest in a couple of ways. Either you can go the Peyton Manning route, where you reach a point where he couldn't throw anymore. He was just so broken down, and the neck and all those things. And Peyton Manning just couldn't make the throws that he used to make. But then you get guys like Brett Favre, who Brett Favre could roll out there tomorrow and still have a top 10 NFL arm. He never lost anything from an arm point of view. Where it manifests in Brett Favre is he reached a point where the hits he was taking, instead of earlier in his career where he was built of granite and he would just tape it up and he'd be back out the next week, you get to 40 years old and that stops working. The stuff that used to just hurt now damages you, now breaks things. Stuff on your body just starts snapping. And did that happen with Rodgers last season? Is that how the decline is manifesting with him? Because Rodgers physically looks just like he did in his 20s. The arm is still crazy zip. He's still athletic. He can still make all those plays. The only sign of it is that his Achilles gave up after 4 snaps last season. So if you're going to rewind that, if you're going to get back to a pre-Achilles tear version of Rodgers, I agree with you. I think this price is nuts. The Jets are legitimate contenders. That roster is stacked. They've got elite players all over the place, and Rodgers throwing to these guys should result in a really high level of play. But if that was the first sort of indication that the body is failing him and he's not going to be that guy anymore, that's, I think, the only way you can justify it.
Yeah, I think the sneaky thing with the Jets as well, which probably hasn't got as much fanfare as some of their bigger signings and Rodgers coming back, is that they should just have an offensive line that resembles something close to competence this season. After last year, it was just a joke. And, Zach Wilson's not great in the best of situations, but he was put in the worst of situations where he had just a revolving door of not very good players and leading to him getting sacked, 8 times or whatever it was against the Chargers. And now just with, I think, look, some of these guys, you can't bank on 16 games, 17 games of Tyron Smith, but you can probably project, 11 or 12, and that's 11 or 12 better games they got at that position. Where do you think this Jets offensive line will end up? Is this a group that is going to be, average, or is it going to be 23rd in the league, which is still probably an improvement on what it was last year?
I think it probably ends up somewhere around average. You're right. You can't bank on a full season's worth of Tyron Smith, but they insulated that by drafting Fashanu, right? Who I think is number one, was underrated by the time we reached the draft. I think a lot of people were understating just how good he is as a pass blocker. But the other element of Tyron Smith is he's probably not going to practice, during the course of a regular week in season, which means Fashanu is getting all the reps, right? Even if Tyron Smith plays the first 15 games of the season, Fashanu may be getting 15 weeks worth of first team reps to develop along while he then sits on the sideline on Sundays waiting for his opportunity. And then, week 15, Tyron Smith goes down injured and Fashanu has to step in. So I think that left tackle spot is going to be in really good situation this year relative to a year ago. And I think they've upgraded at a couple of other spots as well. So I would imagine this is at least an average offensive line. And then the other element here is that Aaron Rodgers can make an offensive line look better as well. Like if that element to his game is still there, along with, the other stuff we talked about before, he can immediately improve the look of an offensive line, even if the group isn't actually playing any better.
I'm perfectly fine if they want to, just kind of lean into the running game a little bit. Let Rodgers kind of get back up to speed, when he's ready for it. The Jays, my most favorite call from the entire betting cycle so far for early prices was Jays look on Breece Hall for Offensive Player of the Year. I still can't believe that this number is out there floating around because he's got no competition, and that is going to be a totally different and elite unit, as from what I can tell you. So yeah, plus 240 for the Jets to win the AFC East also still is absolutely ridiculous. Fair is like closer to what, plus 150-ish if you have just a new average Rodgers, let alone a Rodgers coming back with a little bit something to prove. The kind of the most complete roster, as far as I can tell you, in the NFC side of things is is surprisingly the Chicago Bears. This team has, now comes in obviously with the rookie quarterback, and there's uncertainty kind of swirling around the level of play you'll get from Caleb Williams. But both offensive and defensive depth chart from 2 to 53 they're very, very, very strong. Are you in agreement that the Bears have enough depth here to kind of help kind of smooth out some of the rookie highs and lows? Or do you think that just being in one of the more difficult divisions in football in the NFC North is going to kind of prevent them from really breaking out this year?
Certainly on the offensive side, I'm with you. I think the defense may still be a little bit of a work in progress, and they seem to have kind of said, okay, we like the young players that we have. We're going to rely on them all developing and getting a bit better. Obviously, they've made a couple of veteran additions as well, guys like Kevin Byard coming in at safety. But I think overall, they're relying on a lot of young players taking a step forward on defense. And I'm not convinced that many of them are actually going to do that. So I think the defense may well be a year or two away still. But what they've done on offense is, I think, fantastic. Like that receiving core should be phenomenal. The offensive line will look better immediately just by not having Justin Fields as the quarterback. He was a very bad quarterback for making an offensive line look bad. The amount of time he held onto the ball, the kind of plays where he would invite pressure. If Caleb Williams can, some of the comparisons he got to Patrick Mahomes pre-draft, one of them is that the overarching question for him is the same as Mahomes, which is, can he play more within structure in the NFL level? Because he's going to have to do that. And that was the big question with Mahomes as well. It was never he definitely can't. It was just, we don't know. Obviously, Mahomes resoundingly answered that to the answer being yes. Caleb Williams, I think, will have the same answer. Like there's his play within rhythm and his play, his quick game stuff is actually really, really good in college. So if you just sort of change the ask and the dynamic and say, hey, you don't need to go out and score 40 every play. We have a defense that can actually hold up its end of the bargain. Caleb Williams may end up looking even better than he did in college simply by just staying within the structure of the offense a bit more. And he's got the receivers to make that happen. So I like this Chicago offense to look very, very good. And then the question becomes, how much of an issue is the defense, or how far along have they gone?
Yep. I think that might surprise some people, Sam, just because I think from week 5 onwards, the Bears were like the 4th defense by EPA per play, but a lot of that was driven by turnovers, which, famously year to year is not quite as sustainable. And I think also people have maybe kind of increased the reputation of Montez Sweat, where like Montez Sweat is great, but he's not Max Crosby. He's not quite that tier of player. And so outside of Jalen Johnson, I'm not sure there are that many superstars on this defense. Another team that is being a little inflated, I think, perhaps, are the Atlanta Falcons, who are odds on to win the NFC South. They are minus 120. And I mean, in a way, you can understand that they came close to winning the division last year, and they make what should be a significant upgrade At quarterback, going from Desmond Ridder and friends to Kirk Cousins, albeit Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles tear. Do you think that this team warrants Sam being favorite against the field in the NFC South, or do you think there are question marks about them?
I think a bit of both. I think they do deserve to be favorites against the field. Like, I think I kind of buy into the idea that you put Kirk Cousins on that offense, immediately you've catapulted them into the playoffs. The question is, is the other, it's like a more extreme version of the Bears where their defense just doesn't look good, period. And so then you start looking, well, okay, they probably go immediately straight to the postseason, but have they done enough to actually make noise once they get to the postseason? Because that defense is still a weakness. Cousins obviously famously has had postseason struggles. But I do think that his baseline of play, even if you discount it for being 35 coming off an Achilles, should be more than good enough to make that a very good offense and put them in the postseason. Also, you're shifting scheme. You're going from this Arthur Smith offense that frustrated fantasy managers everywhere and, drove people nuts because of the way it used Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Now you're bringing in Zach Robinson and this Sean McVay coaching tree and a system that theoretically should be an upgrade, not just with Kirk Cousins there, but for everybody else across the board. And it's so close to the system that Cousins has been running in Minnesota. It should be a seamless transition for him, that he's not coming in having to learn a completely new system. And, there's that variable out there in terms of what level of play you're going to get. I think that this offense for Atlanta is going to be really good, and that will propel them to the division win. And then we'll see what they can do then.
I'm on the sidelines still in the NFC South, and we'll see if that changes as we kind of get a sense of the health and ability of Cousins to participate in some of the offseason activities here. But is there a team currently, relative to market, relative to buzz, relative to the way people are kind of getting ready for this season, that you are buying, and a team that you are conversely that you are selling as far as expectations?
Well, just one last thing on the Kirk Cousins thing. We saw him 100 days after the Achilles tear doing a dance number in NFL honors. So I'm no doctor, but to me, that means we're going to get high-level play out of him this season. I can't see any reason that would go against me. Those are the kinds of things that you really put the stock in.
It's very true.
I kind of like Philadelphia to bounce back. I know the market for them is strong. Like, they're projected to have a lot of wins. That was such a complete and total collapse down the stretch last year that it felt like a complete outlier relative to what they should be doing. And I think they fixed the biggest problems. Like, that was a coaching failure. And okay, you can say Nick Sirianni is still there, and he's ultimately the guy that carries the can for that. But changing both coordinators to guys that should, at the minimum, be, good, solid coordinators. Kellen Moore on offense, Vic Fangio coming in on defense. That might fix basically all the problems that Philadelphia had with that collapse down the stretch. So I think that they might be a team that is still very much a Super Bowl contender, and are kind of being not forgotten because the market is with them, but maybe aren't being given quite that amount of respect. In terms of an overrated team, the closest I think would be the Cincinnati Bengals that we talked about before, maybe Buffalo as well. But you start looking through the roster of both those teams, who are obviously sort of high-end Super Bowl contenders, each of them, if just because of the quarterbacks. The rosters that both those teams have start getting not concerning, but you start seeing weaknesses a lot quicker than you do with some of these other teams. So I could see either one of those teams sort of just not being the elite level contender that we're expecting them to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, Buffalo, I think a lot of the focus has been on, the fact that the wide receiver room doesn't look amazing. Like, they've lost a lot of guys on defense, and it's going to be a very different looking defense, a defense that I think kind of found its stride a little bit towards the end of the season and now may have to do it all again. Last one for you, Sam. Just going back to the Eagles, who I agree, they're priced pretty much as a coin flip to beat Dallas in the NFC East. I might lean Philadelphia there, but like, what do we make of Jalen Hurts at this point? Because he was, after he beat the Chiefs and they went to like 9-1 or whatever it was, he was like plus 150 to win MVP, and he was just rising up in all these clutch moments. And then by the Tampa playoff game, he looked kind of like a broken quarterback, where it just seemed like if the first read wasn't open, he was just taking off, and it seemed like he regressed a little bit towards the end of the season from, you know, the guy who effectively went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I know PFF's grading on him was still pretty solid. I think he was the number 8 quarterback overall, but like, where do you rate Jalen Hurts in the context of the league at the moment?
Yeah, and I think, you know, Jalen Hurts was banged up all last season, you know, basically from the outset all the way through it. And it's sort of like he played so completely, you know, it didn't take time off, didn't miss games. He played sort of enough that you almost forget that he was sort of hampered basically for the entire season. And then the collapse that we talked about before was so complete and total that it's almost difficult to understand the effect that was having on him as well. I think he was absolutely a part of that collapse, and we definitely didn't get anything like Jalen Hurts' best play down the stretch, but everything fell apart for the Eagles. So I think it's enough last season to kind of make you tap the brakes where, you know, the year before we were thinking maybe he's on his way to joining that echelon of like truly elite quarterbacks and, you know, could push his way into the Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson type of conversation. I think last season is enough to make you tap the brakes on that and say, okay, he's in that next tier, right? He's in the group with Dak Prescott and maybe Justin Herbert, depending on where you rank him. And, you know, now this is a big year for him to see, is that going to be where he settles, or can he actually bridge that gap and get into that elite level with those other guys? So I think at the minimum, he's a kind of top 10 quarterback right now with a TBD on exactly how high up that list he can push himself. Yep.
No, I think that makes total sense. All right. Well, Sam, thank you very much for joining us, mate. Appreciate it. It's always good to hear a non-American accent on this show. I always welcome that. Can you tell people?
Pretty American at this stage.
Yeah, that's true. Can you tell people where to follow you and what you're working on in the coming weeks?
Yeah, well, down there, PFF_Sam on Twitter/X, whatever we're calling that thing these days, or the PFF NFL podcast, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and on YouTube.
Okay. Very good, mate. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the summer.
Anytime. Take it easy, guys.
Cheers. All right. Quick couple of final thoughts, Drew. Firstly, just a programming note. We're going to be 2 shows a week moving forward for the majority of summer, and they'll drop on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And if there's anything really major that happens, we will jump in for a show, potentially 2. But what else is on the agenda, Drew? So we're kind of pivoting out of the busy season in a way. I was telling my wife before that, you know, everything like work-wise gets a little bit lighter after NFL season. It's not really true at all, because there's NHL ramps up immediately. NBA obviously ramps up immediately. College basketball, March Madness. But now it does start to get a little bit quieter. So what are you going to be doing to keep yourself occupied?
Well, we're already transitioning from clay to grass tennis. That's happening. The Surbiton Challenger on grass is underway as we speak. So fashioning my grass numbers is important. Next step in my tennis betting process. And then we are 2 weeks away from swimming trials, which means the Olympics are around the corner. They're doing swimming trials this year at the Colts Lucas Oil Stadium. Is it still called that? It's at Lucas Oil Stadium. They've fashioned a temporary pool on the field. They're gonna fill that place, or at least fill half of it. That's you know, for watching the trials. And yeah, I could not be more excited. Very excited to see how our U.S. swimming crop looks, because guess what? The world is coming into Paris swimming very, very well right now. So we need to have some of our swimmers show up and start kicking some butt, or else we're going to be in a little bit of a hurt when it comes to medal count in the swimming.
Yeah, I will say, we've spoken about this a little bit before, but the Olympics, it's kind of one event, I guess, where you don't really need to know that much about the given sports. But if you just kind of do your homework and get really deep in the weeds, the edges are fairly easy to find, because you just put yourself in the bookmaker's shoes. Like these are very difficult markets to price. There's not a lot of precedent to go off of. And if you can find, if you're able to pick holes in things and see how books will underreact or overreact to heat times, and they're not waiting, or they're overrating an event, the World Championships, that didn't have someone key featuring. There's a lot of ways into these markets. Liquidity isn't amazing, but it's good enough to make it generally worth someone's while. So yeah, now is the time. with all these like extended breaks with the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals, baseball not really ramping up so much yet. Now is the time to do one's Olympic homework.
So how about you're gonna go against the Germans in Euro 2024, the home team, the host country. We're 2 weeks away from that as well, by the way.
I know that kind of does sneak up on you. That's something I need to do a little bit more homework on. But yeah, I assume there will be some edges to be found in that. I think. And it's funny with like the Boston finals price and a lot of these other things, it kind of reminds you that markets that you assume to be liquid and unbeatable just often aren't. And, sometimes they are. Like, I'm not about to be blasting into the three-way moneyline market of the Champions League final, but there will be some Euro 2024 group prices or even outrights that can be beaten. So that's something I'll dive into in the next couple of weeks. Then outside of that, I think my finals position is largely set in both NBA and NHL. So there'll be more WNBA, more MLS as well, which I get pretty into the weeds on, and then some ongoing baseball stuff. But yeah, we'll quieten down a little bit. So which in a way is good. It's good to have a little bit of not a lull, but just to turn it down a little bit and not be sweating out Celtics paces as the Celtics are down 3 with 10 seconds left, that kind of stuff all the time. So looking forward to a bit of a different speed. But anyway, we are done for now. So don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Thanks again to Sam Monson for joining us. Drew and I will be back for a pod dropping Thursday morning. Until then, good luck.